Four little girls appear on the road asking for food. A millionaire farmer sees the girls and stops the tractor. What happens next is unbelievable. The sun was beginning to set when Jack Dalton stopped the tractor in the middle of the dirt road. It wasn't his choice. The old machine simply decided that was a good place to give its last breath for the day. Jack slammed the steering wheel, muttered a curse, and climbed down to check the engine. It had been a day like any other on the farm, waking before sunrise, feeding the animals, working the land, racing against time. At 42, Jack knew every inch of that property, every tree, every stone. What he didn't know was the sound of small footsteps on the road. He bent down to inspect the engine when he heard it. At first, he thought it might be an animal, maybe one of the neighbor's dogs. But these footsteps had a rhythm, a purpose. Jack straightened up and saw them. Against the setting sun, four tiny silhouettes were walking toward him. Four girls. The oldest couldn't have been more than 6. They walked in a line, the oldest in front, holding the hands of the two smaller ones. The second to last held the last one's hand, a little human train. "Hey!" Jack called, wiping his grease-stained hands on his pants. "What are you doing out here?" The girl in front stopped. The other 3 hid behind her, a fragile shield. "We're lost," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack approached slowly. The road was deserted. No cars, no adults, just him and 4 children who appeared out of nowhere. "Where do you live?" he asked, keeping some distance. The oldest girl lowered her eyes. She didn't answer. Jack looked at their dirty faces, their worn-out shoes, their clothes stained with dirt and grass. Then he looked into their eyes, big, scared, tired. "I'm Jack," he said, kneeling to their level. "Jack Dalton. This is my farm, just over there." He pointed to the house barely visible in the distance. "I'm Emma," the oldest replied after a long silence. "This is Sophie," she indicated the girl of about 4. "And these are Lily and Lila, they're twins." The identical twins, no more than 2 years old, looked at Jack with wide eyes, clinging to each other. "Are you hungry?" Jack asked, noticing how weak they seemed, especially the little ones. 4 heads nodded in unison. "My tractor's broken," Jack explained. "But I can take you home and give you something to eat. Then we'll figure out what to do." Emma studied his face carefully. A child evaluating an adult, something no child should ever need to do. "We can go," she finally agreed, "but only if we all stay together." It was her first rule. Jack understood right away these girls only had each other. "All together," he promised. The walk back to the house was silent. The twins tired quickly, so Jack carried one in each arm. Emma insisted on walking by herself, and Sophie clung to the hem of his shirt. Occasionally, Jack tried making conversation, asking simple questions about their ages, but he got only short answers or silence. Dalton Farm hadn't had visitors in years. Since Jack's parents died, he'd lived alone, talking more to animals than to people. The 2-story house, with its wide porch and dusty windows, looked surprised to see children approaching. "It's not much, but it's safe," Jack said, opening the door. "And there's food." The word food made the girls' eyes light up. Jack led them to the kitchen, a simple room with a large wooden table in the center. An old clock on the wall read 7:30. "Have a seat," he said, placing the twins on the chairs. "I'll whip something up quickly." Emma didn't sit. She stood, watching every one of Jack's moves. Protective, wary. Her eyes followed his hands, scanning every corner of the kitchen, mapping escape routes. Jack opened the fridge and took out eggs, cheese, and milk. From the pantry, he got some bread. He made scrambled eggs and simple sandwiches, nothing fancy, but warm and nourishing. The smell filled the kitchen, and Jack saw Sophie unconsciously lick her lips. When he placed the plates in front of them, he saw something that squeezed his heart. They waited. 4 hungry girls, staring at the food, waiting for permission. "You can eat," he said gently. They ate as if it were their first meal in days. Maybe it was. Jack refilled their cups with milk and watched in silence. Sophie made little sounds of satisfaction. The twins were clumsy, dropping food but determined. Emma ate slowly, always checking to see if her sisters were okay. "There's more if you want," Jack offered when the plates were empty. They served themselves again. Jack sat with them and ate a little, more to make them comfortable than because he was hungry. "How long have you been walking?" he asked casually. Emma chewed slowly before answering. "Since morning? And where are you sleeping?" Silence. Jack didn't push. There would be time for questions later. Right now, the important thing was for them to feel safe. Sophie, the second oldest, looked at him curiously. "Do you live alone in this big house?" "Yes," Jack replied. "Just me and a few animals outside." "What animals?" Sophie's eyes widened. The first genuine spark of interest any of them had shown. "Chickens, pigs, 2 horses, and an old dog named Rex." "Is Rex mean?" Sophie asked, worried. "No, he's lazy and loves kids. You'll meet him tomorrow." After they finished eating, exhaustion took over. Their little eyes grew heavy, their small bodies relaxing for the first time in a long while. Lily, one of the twins, nearly fell off the chair in her sleep. "You need a bath and some rest," Jack said. Bath time was complicated. Jack filled the tub with warm water and found an old t-shirt that could serve as a nightgown for all of them. Emma insisted on helping her sisters, but she herself was exhausted. "I can help," Jack offered, "or you can do it by yourself. Your choice." Emma hesitated, but entrusted the twins to him. Jack washed their hair carefully, wiped the dirt from their little faces, dried them with soft towels. Sophie giggled when he made funny noises to distract her. The twins were practically asleep on their feet by then. Jack prepared the guest room untouched for years. He dusted, changed the sheets, opened the windows. One double bed would be enough for all 4. When the girls entered the room, bathed and wearing oversized t-shirts, they seemed different. Lighter, more like children. "Is it safe here?" Emma asked, still the guardian. "Very safe," Jack assured. "I'll be right downstairs. Just call if you need anything." The girls settled into the big bed, the twins in the middle, Sophie and Emma on the edges, a nest of fallen birds that, by some miracle, had found shelter. The twins fell asleep almost instantly. Sophie fought sleep a little longer, looking around curiously before closing her eyes. Emma was the last. She lay there, vigilant, until exhaustion won. Jack stood in the doorway for a moment, watching. 4 soft breaths, 4 fragile lives that fate had placed in his path. He closed the door gently and went downstairs. He sat on the front porch with a mug of coffee in his hands. The night was clear, full of stars. Far away, his tractor still stood on the road, a problem for tomorrow. Jack took a long sip of coffee. He didn't know where the girls had come from or what had happened to them. He didn't know if someone was looking for them, if they had family, if they were really just lost. There were many questions, but they would have to wait. What he did know was that he couldn't simply drop them off at some shelter and go on with his life. That idea never even crossed his mind. Instead, he thought of how to adjust his routine to accommodate them, how he would take care of them while working, how he would make the house more comfortable for children. Jack didn't know much about children. He never had kids, never had nieces or nephews. His adult life had been marked by solitude, a choice he rarely questioned, until today. He finished his coffee and went back inside. He washed the dinner dishes, tidied the kitchen, checked that all the doors were locked. He did everything in silence, as always, but now the silence felt different. It wasn't empty. It was full of responsibility. Before going to his own room, Jack climbed the stairs and opened the guest room door just a crack. The girls were still sleeping soundly. Safe, at least for this night. Something in him had changed. Jack knew that for certain. What he didn't know was how much. Jack woke before sunrise, as he always did. But for the first time in years, silence didn't greet him. Upstairs, in the guest room, 4 little girls slept. 4 unexpected responsibilities. In the kitchen, he brewed coffee stronger than usual. He was going to need it. While the coffee machine bubbled, Jack looked out the window. The tractor was still on the road, a problem he needed to fix soon, but now he had more urgent priorities. He opened the fridge to assess what he had: eggs, milk, some bacon, flour in the pantry. He decided to make pancakes. Kid food, he thought. He wasn't sure, as he'd had almost no experience with children, but he remembered liking them when he was young. Jack was working on the batter when he heard it. A creak on the floorboards, light footsteps on the stairs. He turned to see Emma standing at the kitchen doorway. The oversized t-shirt served as her nightgown, and her brown hair was tousled from sleep. But her eyes were alert, watchful. "Good morning," Jack said, trying to sound casual. Emma didn't answer right away. She surveyed the kitchen, the pans, the batter in his hands. "Are the others still sleeping?" Jack asked, giving her space to come closer. "Sophie is. The twins woke up, but they're keeping quiet." Her voice was steadier in the morning, less frightened but still cautious. "I'm making pancakes. Do you like them?" Emma shrugged. "Never had them." That surprised Jack, a 6-year-old who'd never eaten pancakes. "Well then, today's your lucky day," he replied, trying to keep a light tone. "Want to help me?" Emma hesitated, then came closer. Jack noticed how she observed every step he took, as though memorizing instructions. "You can stir the batter while I heat up the skillet," he suggested, offering her the bowl and a wooden spoon. Emma took the job seriously. She stood on her tiptoes to better reach the bowl on the counter. Jack adjusted the height for her, placing the bowl on the table. "Where did you come from, Emma?" Jack asked casually as he lit the stove. Emma stirred the batter for a long time before answering. "Far away." "How far?" "Really far. We walked a lot." Jack didn't press. He knew when someone needed time. Instead, he showed her how to test if the skillet was hot enough by dripping a little water. "When it sizzles like that, it's ready," he explained when the water crackled. Emma watched, fascinated. The smell of the first pancakes filled the kitchen, and soon they heard more footsteps on the stairs. Sophie appeared, dragging her feet, followed by Lila and Lily, who leaned on each other as they came down. "Hello, girls," Jack greeted. "Did you sleep well?" Sophie nodded, rubbing her eyes. The twins looked at Emma, as if asking for confirmation that everything was okay. "We're making pancakes," Emma announced. "I'm helping." That seemed to reassure the younger ones. If Emma was helping, it must be safe. Jack set the table. 4 small plates, 4 cups, 4 little forks. He had no special children's dishes, but he made do with what he had. He served the pancakes, placing some maple syrup and butter on the table. "Help yourselves," he offered, watching the girls settle in. Sophie was the first to try, cutting a piece and putting it cautiously into her mouth. Her eyes widened. "This is so good," she exclaimed, mouth still full. The twins mimicked her, though they needed help cutting. Emma ate more slowly, but Jack noticed she liked them too. "Got any coffee?" Emma asked, and pointing to his mug. "Coffee isn't a drink for kids," Jack said, surprised by the question. "I always drink a little. Helps us stay awake to look after the little ones." There was something deeply wrong in that sentence. A 6-year-old shouldn't have to stay awake to look after anyone. "Today you don't have to stay awake so much," Jack said gently. "You're safe here." "But—" He grabbed another mug, poured in a finger of coffee and filled the rest with plenty of milk. "We can share a little bit." Emma took the mug as if it were a treasure. She blew on it carefully before sipping. A small smile appeared on her face. "Thank you." As they ate, Jack thought about his next steps. He needed to call the police to report missing children. That was the proper procedure, but something bothered him. The fear in their eyes when he found them, Emma's caution, the way they avoided talking about where they came from. "What do we do after breakfast?" Sophie asked, interrupting his thoughts. Jack hadn't planned that. His routine didn't include entertaining children. "Well, I need to work on the farm." "You can help if you want, or stay here and play." "Work how?" Emma asked, interested. "I have to feed the animals, check the garden, and that tractor on the road won't fix itself." "Can we see the animals?" Sophie asked excitedly. Jack smiled. "Of course you can." After breakfast, Jack found some old shirts that could serve as temporary dresses for the girls. He tied knots at the hems so they wouldn't drag on the ground. Not ideal, but good enough until he figured out their situation. The sun was already high when they went to the backyard. Rex, the old dog, came limping toward them. He was a big mutt, with yellowish fur and one droopy ear. Sophie fell in love immediately. "He's so cute," she exclaimed, petting the dog's head, which he answered with a quick lick of her hand. The twins were more cautious, hiding behind Emma. Jack noticed how they always moved together like a single unit. "Rex is harmless," he assured. "He just wants affection and maybe a few scraps of food." Emma approached first, slowly extending her hand. When Rex licked it, she laughed. It was the first truly childlike sound Jack had heard from her. They walked to the barn. The smell of fresh hay and animals filled the air. Jack showed them the two horses, a chestnut named Thunder and a pinto mare named Spot. "Why is she called Spot if she has lots of spots?" Sophie asked, making Jack laugh. "That's a good question. Maybe she should have been called Spots, in the plural." In the pen next to the barn, 5 large pink pigs snorted around in the mud. Sophie watched them, fascinated. "They're funny," she said, as one pig rolled in the mud with obvious delight. Her laughter was contagious. Jack then took the girls to the chicken coop. When he opened the little door, a few chickens hurried out, pecking at the ground. "Look, look!" Lily, or was it Lila? Jack still couldn't tell them apart, pointed excitedly. The twins, who had been so quiet until then, came alive. They began chasing the chickens, which clucked indignantly. Their shrill giggles filled the yard. Emma, as always, kept an eye on her sisters, but Jack noticed she was smiling too, her shoulders less tense than before. "They seem happy," Jack commented, standing beside her. "They haven't had much reason to laugh lately," Emma replied, her gaze distant. "We didn't have much to laugh about." The sentence hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. "You're all really close," Jack observed after a while. Emma nodded. "We only have each other." Jack would have asked more, but Sophie ran up to them just then. "Jack, Jack, can I feed the chickens, please?" He showed her how to scatter the feed, and soon all 4 girls were involved. The chickens pecked around them, and even the twins, so little, tossed feed enthusiastically. Jack watched them. There was a harmony among them, a way of communicating that went beyond words. Emma knew exactly when one twin was tired or when Sophie needed help. They protected and complimented each other. It was a kind of love Jack hadn't seen in a long time. Maybe he had never seen it, not in this pure, instinctive way. He remembered his own childhood, an only child, with loving but reserved parents, just as he himself had become. He had never experienced the sense of belonging he saw among these sisters. One chicken got too close to Lila, who got scared and ran to Emma. The oldest hugged her, whispering comforting words in her ear. The little one quickly calmed down and went back to playing. After feeding the chickens, Jack took the girls to the garden. It was a decent area behind the house, with neat rows of vegetables and a few fruit trees. He showed them the tomatoes growing, the carrots hidden underground, the peas climbing up their supports. "If anyone wants to help me, you can pick some peas," he offered, showing them how to identify ripe pods. Sophie loved the task. The twins, already tired, sat on the grass, playing with small stones. Emma picked up a small basket and began collecting peas with determination. Jack worked alongside her in a comfortable silence. He noticed how her small hands were skilled, how she checked each pod before picking it. "You've done this before," he commented. "We had some plants," Emma replied. "Not many, but it helped with food." Jack nodded, understanding. After a while, when only the 2 of them remained in the garden, Sophie had run off to play with Rex and the twins were asleep under an apple tree. Jack tried again. "Emma, I know you've been through tough things, and I get that it's scary to trust adults, but I need to know a bit more so I can help." Emma kept picking peas, her eyes fixed on the plants. "Our mum is sick," she finally said in a low voice. "We went out to find help, but got lost." Jack felt a knot in his throat, confirmation of his fears. "Is she alone now?" Emma nodded. "In the cabin. She told us to stay put, but there wasn't any more food, and she was really hot. She couldn't get up anymore. High fever, a mother too sick to care for her children. No food, desperate young kids. Do you know where that cabin is? Could you show me?" Emma looked at him, hope and fear mixed in her gaze. "It's past the river, in a place with lots of trees. It has a red door." It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Emma," Jack said, kneeling so he was at her eye level, "I'm going to look for your mom. You'll stay here, safe?" The girl's eyes filled with tears. "Promise." "I promise." Emma extended her small hand. Jack took it gently, sealing the pact. A silent handshake that meant more than 1,000 words. They finished picking peas in silence. Jack thought about how to plan the search. He knew the region well, but there were plenty of wooded areas beyond the river. He would need help. When they returned to the others, Sophie was telling an elaborate story to the twins, who listened in rapt attention, something about a magical kingdom where animals could talk. Jack noticed how she'd woven the farm's pigs and chickens into the narrative. He smiled, impressed by her creativity. Lunch was more relaxed than breakfast. Jack made sandwiches and served some of the peas they had picked. The girls ate with a healthy appetite. Even the twins, so quiet until then, asked for more. "How do you know the time without a clock?" Sophie asked, when Jack mentioned it was nearly nap time. "By the sun," he explained. "When you work the land, you learn to read the sky." Sophie's eyes shone with admiration. "I want to learn too." "I'll teach you," Jack promised. Then he paused, surprised by himself. He spoke as if they would be staying, as if he had time to teach Sophie everything she wanted to learn. After lunch, while the girls rested, the little ones actually sleeping, Sophie and Emma just quietly sitting on the couch, Jack made a few phone calls. First to Paul Jackson, his nearest neighbor, a robust middle-aged man who raised sheep on the property to the north. "Paul, it's Jack. I need a favor." Then to Matthew Miller, who lived on the other side of the river and knew every trail in the region. "Matt, Jack Dalton, can you come over this afternoon? It's important." Both agreed without asking too many questions. In that rural area, people helped each other without requiring a lot of explanation. When he hung up, Jack looked out the kitchen window. The day was clear, perfect for a search. Early tomorrow, they'd head out. He returned to the living room and found Emma awake, watching him. "My friends will help me find your mom," he said. "We'll leave early in the morning." Emma nodded. "Thank you." Jack sat in the armchair next to the couch. "In the meantime, you'll stay here. I'll ask Mrs. Miller, Matthew's wife, to stay with you." "Is she nice?" "Very. She has 5 kids, all grown. She knows how to handle children better than I do." Emma seemed to accept that. They were silent for a moment, only the ticking of the wall clock marking time. "Jack," she called, her voice small. "Yes? Do you think Mom's going to be okay?" Jack felt the weight of that question. He couldn't promise something he didn't know, but he couldn't destroy the child's hope either. "We'll do everything we can to help her," he answered honestly. "And you're all safe now," which is what she would want the most. Emma closed her eyes, absorbing the answer. When she opened them again, they held a new determination. "We'll stay here quietly. We won't cause trouble. I promise." "I know," Jack smiled. "You're all great kids." Outside, a gentle breeze swayed the tree branches. The sun began its descent westward. At Dalton Farm, 4 lost girls had found a temporary refuge, and Jackie, without planning it, had found a purpose he didn't know he was looking for. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but today, at least, there were 4 plates at the table, laughter in the yard, and the promise of shared coffee the next morning. Jack woke before dawn, the sky still grey and dotted with stars. There was much to do. He needed to organize a search for the girl's mother, but also make sure they'd be okay while he was gone. In his makeshift office, he drew a map of the region. He circled the areas near the river where Emma said the cabin was. He made a list of people who could help, Paul and Matthew, maybe old Harris with his jeep. He also noted what they'd need to bring: flashlights, ropes, a first aid kit, water, blankets. He was so focused, he didn't notice Emma standing at the door, watching him. "Is that where you're going to look for Mom?" she asked, pointing to the map. Jack nodded. "Yes. We'll find her, Emma." The girl approached, studying the circles on the paper. "Can I help today?" Jack smiled. "Sure. I need lots of help around here while I get things organized." After breakfast, Jack assigned tasks, small responsibilities that made the girls feel useful and kept their minds occupied. "Sophie, you can help me feed the chickens," Jack said, handing her a small bucket of feed. The 4-year-old's eyes sparkled. "Really? Sure, they like to eat in the morning. I'll show you how." For Emma, Jack gave a child-sized watering can he found in the barn. "The tomatoes need water every day. Think you can handle that?" Emma took the watering can like it was a treasure. "I'll take good care of them, I promise." The twins were too small for solo tasks, but they followed Sophie around the yard, giggling whenever the chickens ran toward them, eager for food. While the girls worked, Jack made more phone calls. They set up the search for the next day, bright and early. Paul would bring his nephew, who knew the river area well. Matthew would lend his jeep, better for rough terrain. Outside, the sound of children's laughter replaced the usual silence of the farm. Jack watched through the window as Sophie tossed the feed with exaggerated enthusiasm, scattering it everywhere. The twins clapped at every move. Emma, in the garden, watered the plants with precision and care, inspecting each leaf like a little gardener. By noon, they came back inside, sweaty and smiling. "Uncle Jack, the chickens almost ate my hand," Sophie exclaimed, running up to him. The Uncle Jack came naturally, without anyone suggesting it. It sounded right. "They are greedy indeed," Jack replied, handing out clean towels. "Time to wash up for lunch." In the afternoon, while the younger ones napped, Jack took Emma to the barn. He showed her the tools, explained what they were for. He let her help fix a broken bench, holding the nails while he hammered. "You know how to do a lot of things," she commented, impressed. "When you live on a farm, you learn a bit of everything," Jack explained. "I can teach you one day if you want." Emma nodded enthusiastically. For a moment, Jack saw just a normal kid, not the little adult who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. By the end of the day, Jack Dalton's house was unrecognizable, not in its physical layout, but in the energy filling it. Small shoes lined up at the entryway, drawings by Sophie taped to the fridge, the twins asleep on the couch, hugging each other. Emma in the kitchen, helping prepare dinner. There were different smells too. The neighbor, Martha Miller, had shown up to help and brought bread dough. She showed Sophie how to knead it, the little hands pressing into the flour with determination. "Like this, Uncle Jack. Look how I do it," Sophie would call every few minutes. The aroma of baking bread filled every corner, pushing out the lonely scent that had settled in the house over the years. The table was set for 5 now, not just 1. Children's voices echoed off the walls, questions, laughter, even small spats between sisters. Jack watched all this with a mix of wonder and gratitude. He hadn't planned it, hadn't sought this change, but now that it was happening, he realized how silent his life had been, how he had grown used to the absence of other voices besides his own. Tomorrow they would face new challenges. The search would be hard, the unanswered questions would linger. But tonight, at least, there were 4 little plates at the table, laughter in the yard, and the promise of a shared breakfast in the morning. The house had changed, and so had he. It was still dark when Jack finished loading the pickup truck. Flashlights, water, supplies, a first aid kit, extra blankets. He didn't know what he would find, but he wanted to be ready for anything. Paul and Matthew arrived almost at the same time, just before dawn. They parked next to Jack's house and got out with determined expressions. Men of the land didn't need many words to understand the seriousness of a situation. "Morning, Jack," greeted Matthew, a short, broad-shouldered man with a graying beard. "Ready to head out?" Jack nodded, glancing once more at the map where he had marked potential locations based on Emma's clues. The area beyond the river was large, with many secondary trails and dense woodland. The search could be long. Emma appeared on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes still heavy with sleep. Jack approached her. "We'll be back before dark," he promised. "Mrs. Miller is coming to stay with you. Look after your sisters." Emma nodded solemnly. "You're going to find Mom, aren't you?" "I'll do everything I can," he replied, gently touching her shoulder. "Remember everything you told me about the cabin?" "Red door near the river, lots of yellow flowers," Emma recited, as if she'd repeated those words to herself many times during the night. "That's right. We're good trackers, Emma. We'll find her." The girl surprised him with a quick hug before going back inside. Jack swallowed hard, feeling the weight of responsibility. He couldn't fail this child who had already endured so much. The three men left with the first light of day. Matthew drove, knowing the paths beyond the river best. The truck jolted along the dirt road, moving through increasingly wild areas. When the path became impassable for vehicles, they parked and continued on foot. Emma said they walked for a whole day, Jack reminded them, adjusting his backpack. But they're small children, so they couldn't have gone too far. And they were lost, Paul added, probably walked in circles. The forest grew denser as they advanced. Jack checked his compass often, guiding the group toward the river. The sound of running water led them for almost an hour until they reached the bank. We'll follow the river upstream, Jack decided. Emma mentioned they could hear the water. They walked in silence, alert for any sign of human habitation. The sun climbed higher, heating the day and making the trek more exhausting. They stopped briefly to drink water and consult the map. If we don't find anything this way, we can try the other side, Matthew suggested, pointing to the river's opposite bank. But it wasn't necessary. Shortly after they resumed, Paul pointed ahead. Look, yellow flowers. A patch of wild sunflowers stretched about 100 yards from the riverbank. They seemed out of place, as if deliberately planted among the native vegetation. Someone cultivated them, Jack said, feeling a spark of hope. They crossed the field of sunflowers, following a barely visible trail among the tall flowers. Then they saw it, partially hidden by trees, a small wooden cabin with a bright red door. There it is, Jack muttered, quickening his pace. Up close, the cabin looked even more precarious, missing roof shingles, windows covered with plastic instead of glass, and a front porch that looked ready to collapse, not a place fit for winter, barely adequate for autumn. Jack knocked on the door. "Hello, anyone there?" No answer. He tried the knob. The door wasn't locked and opened with a creak of rusty hinges. Inside, and it was dark and stuffy. Jack blinked, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light that filtered through dirty little windows. The main room was bare, a simple table, 2 mismatched chairs, a torn couch. On the walls, children's drawings taped up, clearly the work of the girls, Jack realized at once. "Hello?" he called again. "We came to help." Only silence responded. A partially open door at the back led to another room. Jack signaled for Paul and Matthew to wait and went forward alone, stepping carefully on the creaking floorboards. It was a tiny bedroom. In the shadows, Jack saw someone lying on a thin mattress on the floor. He approached cautiously. A woman lay motionless, covered by a thin sheet. Her face was pale, blotched with fever, dark hair plastered to her sweat-damp forehead. She was breathing laboriously, lips dry and cracked. Jack knelt beside her. "Ma'am, we're here to help. Your daughters are safe." When he touched her forehead to check her temperature, a beam of light from the window illuminated her face more clearly. Jack felt as though the air had been knocked from his lungs. "Leah!" The name slipped from his mouth in incredulous disbelief. Leah Carter, the girl who grew up on the neighboring farm, his childhood playmate. His first adolescent crush, the friend who vanished with her mother, no explanation or farewell, leaving only questions and a void he'd never managed to fill. My God. Leah. She didn't respond. She was unconscious, breathing shallowly, fever burning her up. Jack leaned closer, whispering in her ear, "I have your girls. They're safe. Emma, Sophie, Lily, and Lila. All safe." For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of relief cross her face, though her eyes remained closed. "Paul, Matthew," Jack called, without looking away from Leah. "I found her. She's burning up. We have to get her out of here now." The 2 men quickly entered the room. Paul, as who had volunteer first aid experience, knelt to examine Leah. "Severe dehydration, high fever. Probably some kind of infection," he said, checking her pulse. "We need to get her to a doctor ASAP." Jack scanned the room, taking in signs of dire poverty and desperation. On a small table beside the mattress, a half-empty glass of water and an empty bottle of painkillers. A small pile of children's clothes folded neatly in a corner. A well-worn storybook. On an improvised shelf made of planks and bricks, he found a framed photo. In it, Leah looked younger and healthier, smiling with the four girls. Emma, serious as always, Sophie's wide grin, and the twins, Lily and Lila, in their mother's arms, identical down to their hair ribbons. Jack slipped the photo into his jacket pocket. "How do we move her?" Matthew asked, eyeing the path they'd have to retrace. "The mattress," Jack replied. "We can use the ropes to make a sort of stretcher." They worked quickly, fastening the thin mattress with the ropes they had brought. Before leaving, Jack gathered any essential items he found: birth certificates for the girls, Leah's ID, some clothes. The return trip was much slower and harder than the journey out. They took turns carrying the improvised stretcher, 2 men at a time, while the third cleared the way through the brush. Jack insisted on staying close to Leah, constantly checking her breathing, offering water to her cracked lips even though she didn't respond. The sun was beginning to set when they finally reached the pickup truck. Gently, they laid Leah in the back seat, her head resting on Jack's lap. "Straight to Dr. Harris," he instructed, as Paul started the engine. Throughout the jostling ride on the dirt road, Jack couldn't take his eyes off Leah's face. She was, and wasn't, the same person he'd known. Time and hardship had left their marks, but he could still see the girl he once knew so well. How could life have separated them so completely, only to bring them back together like this so many years later? What circumstances had led Leah Carter, the neighbor's daughter, to end up alone and sick in a ramshackle cabin with 4 young daughters? So many questions without answers, so many lost years, but this wasn't the time for that. Dr. Harris lived in the small town 20 miles from the farm. He was the closest doctor, an elderly man who had served the rural community for decades, sometimes accepting payment in produce when money was scarce. They arrived at dusk. The doctor was already waiting on the porch, alerted by a phone call Matthew had managed to make at a gas station along the way. "Bring her inside," Dr. Harris instructed, leading them to a back room of the house that served as a makeshift clinic. Jack watched anxiously as the doctor examined Leah. His movements were efficient and professional, but Jack noted the concern in his eyes. "Likely pneumonia," the doctor finally said, "plus severe dehydration and exhaustion. I'll start intravenous antibiotics and rehydrate her, but she'll need constant care in the coming days." "Will she be okay?" Jack's question came out almost like a plea. The doctor adjusted his glasses, looking at him seriously. "She's a young woman, apparently healthy before this. With proper care, yes, she should fully recover, but it will take time. What do we need to do?" "Keep her hydrated, administer medications on schedule, monitor her fever, and absolute rest." Dr. Harris gave Jack a curious look. "Do you have a place to care for her?" "At my house," Jack answered without hesitation. "Her daughters are already there." The doctor nodded, asking no more questions. One of the advantages of small rural communities, people helped first and asked later, if at all. After nearly 2 hours of intensive treatment, Leah was stable enough to travel. Dr. Harris set up an IV drip and provided medications with detailed instructions. Jack paid for the visit and the drugs, ignoring Paul's and Matthew's polite protests that they should share the costs. It was fully night by the time they finally returned to the farm. Martha Miller hurried out at the sound of the truck engine, followed by Emma, who ran to them the moment she spotted Jack. "You found her," the girl exclaimed, her eyes wide on the figure of her mother being carefully carried out of the vehicle. "Yes, Emma," Jack said softly. "We found your mom. She's really sick, but she'll get better." The doctor gave her the right medicine. Emma stayed by their side as they took Leah inside, her eyes never leaving her mother's face. Jack had prepared his own bedroom for Leah, with fresh sheets and the window slightly open for air. Moving gently, they settled her onto the bed. "Can I stay with her?" Emma asked in a low voice. "Of course," Jack replied. "But let her rest a bit first. Why don't you go tell your sisters that Mom is here?" Emma nodded and ran off to fetch her sisters. Jack turned to Martha, who watched the scene with understanding eyes. "So it's her, the girl's mother?" "Yes," Jack replied, still processing it all. "And an old friend, Leah Carter. We grew up together. But she left many years ago." Martha nodded, not prying for more details. The little ones behaved well. Sophie helped me bake cookies, and even the twins are more talkative now. Jack thanked her, Paul and Matthew profusely before they left, promising to keep them updated on Leah's condition. When everyone was gone, he returned to the bedroom and sat in the chair next to the bed, watching Leah's face. Even in illness, even after all these years, he would have recognized her anywhere. Soon, Emma returned with her sisters. All four approached the bed with a mix of caution and relief. Sophie began to cry quietly, and the twins reached out to touch their mother's arm. "Is she sleeping?" one of them asked. Lily, Jack thought. "Yes," he replied softly. "She's really tired and sick, but sleeping will help her get better." Emma carefully climbed onto the edge of the bed and lay beside her mother, taking care not to disturb the IV in her arm. Her small fingers gently stroked Leah's face, and Jack felt a lump in his throat. "We're at Uncle Jack's farm, Mum," she whispered. "It's a good place. We're eating well." Jack let the girls have their moment alone with their mother and went to make a simple dinner. His head still spun with the discovery, the past that had resurfaced, the 1,000 questions he had no answers for. For 3 days, Leah drifted in and out of consciousness, waking only briefly to drink water or take medicine. Jack cared for her tirelessly, following Dr. Harris's instructions to the letter. The girls took turns in the room, always supervised by Jack or Martha, who continued helping. On the morning of the 4th day, Jack was changing Leah's IV when he realized she was watching him. Her eyes were clear, focused, for the first time since he found her. "Jack?" Her voice was a hoarse whisper, almost unrecognizable. "Yes, Leah, it's me." He came closer, heart pounding. "My daughters." She tried to sit up, alarmed. "They're safe," he assured her, gently preventing her from straining herself. "All 4 of them, Emma, Sophie, Lily, and Lila, they're here, at my place." Leah relaxed against the pillow, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "How?" "I found your girls on the road near the farm. They were looking for help because you were sick. Emma led us to you." Leah closed her eyes, as if trying to organize her thoughts. When she opened them again, they were full of gratitude. "Thank you, Jack," she whispered, "for taking care of them, for finding me." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of so many unasked questions and unspoken words between them. But this wasn't the time. "Get some rest," he said, adjusting the blankets. "I'll call the girls. They're eager to talk to you." The reunion was emotional. The 4 girls piled onto the bed, talking all at once about the farm, the animals, the food, Uncle Jack. Leah embraced them with all the strength she had, kissing each face, checking each one like she still couldn't believe they were truly safe. The following days brought steady improvement. Leah began sitting up, then walking around her room, and finally going downstairs with help to have meals at the table with everyone. Jack watched her recovery with a mix of relief and apprehension. As she grew stronger, he knew the questions would inevitably come, from both sides. A silence hung between them. Not hostile or uncomfortable, but respectful, full of mutual acknowledgement that there were stories to be told, explanations to be given. There was also an unspoken agreement that it would happen in due time. For now, it was enough that they were all there, safe, under the same roof. 2 weeks had passed since Jack brought Leah home. Her fever was completely gone. Color had returned to her cheeks, and in Dr. Harris's last visit, he declared her almost fully recovered. That morning, Jack woke to the unusual sound of a broom scraping across the kitchen floor. He went downstairs, still sleepy, coffee already filling the air. He stopped at the entrance, surprised by the scene. Leah was sweeping with firm, steady movements, already dressed, hair pulled back. She no longer looked like the frail woman he'd carried in just weeks earlier. The girls were seated at the table, Sophie helping the twins with cereal, while Emma folded napkins. "Good morning," Jack said, stepping into the kitchen. Leah turned, leaning on the broom. "Morning. Hope you don't mind, but I thought it was time I did something useful around here." Jack noticed the resolve in her voice. He knew that tone. Leah had always been stubborn, always eager to prove she could handle anything. "Shouldn't you still be resting?" "I've rested enough," she replied, returning to her sweeping. "Besides, Sitting still was never my thing. Jack smiled, recalling how she'd always been the first to climb a tree, the fastest to finish homework. At least let me make coffee, he offered. It's already done, Leah pointed to the coffee maker. Just need to serve it. The children watched the adults' interaction with interest. Emma, especially, seemed to evaluate each word, each gesture. After breakfast, Jack got ready to work outside. He was about to ask Emma to water the plants, as he did every day, when Leah spoke up. Mind if I help in the garden today? Jack hesitated. Are you sure you're strong enough? Jack, Leah crossed her arms. I've spent years working in far worse conditions than your well-kept garden. I'm not going to faint because of a few carrots. There was a challenge in her eyes, a need to prove herself. Jack recognized that look and knew arguing was pointless. All right, he agreed. Emma can show you what we're doing. She's become quite the little expert. The girl beamed with pride. When Jack returned for lunch, he discovered Leah hadn't limited herself to the garden. The house was spotlessly clean, laundry hung on the line, and a stew bubbled on the stove. She sat at the table with the twins, showing them how to draw simple flowers with colored pencils. You've been busy, Jack commented, washing his hands at the sink. It felt good, she answered without looking up from Lily's drawing. I missed doing normal things. During lunch, Jack watched how Leah interacted with her daughters, firm but caring, attentive to each of their needs. He also noticed how her eyes sometimes flicked around the kitchen, assessing the space, planning the next chore. Leah, he said after the girls went out to play, we need to talk. She straightened her shoulders, as though bracing for something unpleasant. About the arrangement here, Jack chose his words carefully. You're recovering well, and it's clear you want to be active. Are we bothering you? Leah interrupted, a flush creeping into her cheeks. I can understand if you want your space back. No, Jack said quickly. Not that at all. In fact, I've never seen this house so alive. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. What I'm trying to say is, you're working. And you should be paid for it. Leah blinked, confused. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. You're taking care of the house, the garden, cooking. That's work. Leah, valuable work. It's not right for you to do all that without compensation. She opened her mouth to protest, but Jack raised his hand. It's not charity. It's fair payment for your labor. Leah closed her mouth, thinking. Jack could see the conflict in her eyes, pride versus practical need. My daughters need things, she finally said in a low voice. Clothes, shoes. I don't want to ask for more than you've already given. You won't be asking. You'll be earning. Jack reached into a drawer and took out a small notebook and a pen. He opened it to a blank page and placed it on the table. Let's agree on a fair weekly rate. You can write down whatever you spend, whatever you need. Leah touched the notebook with her fingertips, as if it was something precious. Why? She asked, looking straight into his eyes. Jack met her gaze. Because all work deserves dignity, Leah, and dignity begins with acknowledgement. Something in her face shifted. A tension she'd been carrying began to ease. She nodded once, firmly. I accept. The following Saturday, Jack drove Leah and the girls into the nearby small town. He parked in front of Mr. Willis's General Supply Store, a place that sold just about everything, from groceries to clothing and tools. Leah held onto the money she had earned during her first week. It wasn't much, but to her, it represented something she hadn't had in a long time. Choice. Inside the store, Leah walked the aisles with sharp eyes. She bought better quality soap, some vegetables they didn't grow, a small bottle of inexpensive perfume, and most importantly, shoes, used but in good condition, for each of her daughters. Sophie tried hers on with pure wonder on her face. They're beautiful, Mom. And they're the right size, Leah smiled, fastening the buckle on Sophie's shoe. They won't hurt your feet. Jack watched from outside the store, giving the family space to savor the moment. On the way back, Sophie couldn't stop staring at her feet, admiring the new brown shoes with gold buckles. The twins were equally fascinated by their colorful new sneakers, though they expressed it less clearly. Mom bought them with real money, Sophie explained to Jack, as if he didn't know. That she earned doing real work. Oh yeah, Jack replied, feigning surprise. Yes, Mom works in your house and you pay her. And now we have new shoes." From the passenger seat, Leah blushed, a light pink tint in her cheeks. Jack realized it was the first time he'd seen her genuinely embarrassed, not from need but from pride. Back at the farm, the girls ran off to show their new shoes to Rex the dog, who sniffed them with polite interest. "Mom paid for them with her work," Sophie announced to the dog, who wagged his tail in approval. Leah stood on the porch, watching. When Jack joined her, he noticed her eyes were shining. "Thank you," she said simply. Jack just nodded. No more words were needed. In the days that followed, a comfortable routine settled in. Each morning, after breakfast, Leah and Jack divided the tasks. He handled the heavier farm work while she managed the house and the children. In the afternoons, they often worked together in the garden, which thrived under their combined care. Leah turned out to be a skilled gardener. She knew when to harvest, how to prune, which plants grew best together. Emma followed her around like a little shadow, soaking up every lesson. "Where'd you learn so much about planting?" Jack asked one afternoon as they prepared new garden beds. "My mom," Leah said, loosening the soil with her hands. Later, an older gentleman who let us stay on a piece of his land for a while, and a lot by trial and error. She paused. "When food is scarce, you learn quickly how to grow what you can." Jack nodded, respecting the untold history behind those words. The house's pantry, once organized in the minimal style of a single man, now showed Leah's influence. Cans were grouped by type E, grains in clear labeled jars, spices in small matching containers. Sophie helped organize, decorating the labels with colorful drawings. "These are beans," she explained seriously to Jack, pointing to a jar with a childlike drawing of smiling beans. "And these are pasta. See how I drew them long?" "Very well done," Jack praised. "Now I'll always know where everything is." The twins, who had been so quiet at first, now spoke more, especially when Leah sat with them for small crafts. With colorful thread, buttons, and beads, they made simple bracelets and necklaces. Jack even got one, made especially by Lila, with blue beads and a tiny bell. "So you can hear it when you're far away," the little one explained, with Leah's help clarifying her still somewhat muddled speech. Jack wore the bracelet to work, the bell jingling softly as he drove the tractor or fixed fences. It was a constant reminder of the new life occupying his house. Sometimes at night, after the girls were asleep, Jack and Leah would sit on the porch with cups of tea or coffee. They rarely spoke of the past. That subject hovered between them, neither avoided nor confronted. Instead, they talked about the present, the girls' needs, plans for the garden, little improvements around the house. "Emma's reading a lot better," Leah remarked one of those nights. "Thanks for the books." Jack had dug up an old box of children's books from the attic, leftovers from his own childhood. "She's smart," he replied. "They all are, each in their own way." Leah nodded, looking up at the stars. "Sophie has a way with people. She can make anyone smile." The twins, they notice things I don't even see. "And Emma carries the world on her shoulders," Jack added softly. "Yes," Leah sighed. She had to grow up too fast. Jack wanted to ask why, wanted to know what had happened in the years since Leah's abrupt departure, but he respected her pace. Trust, like the garden plants, needed time to take root. Twice a week, Leah set aside a strict portion of her earnings for savings. She recorded every penny in the notebook Jack had given her, planning carefully. "What are you saving up to buy?" Jack asked once, seeing her do the math. "Independence," Leah replied simply. Jack understood. As welcoming as his home might be, however comfortable their situation felt, Leah needed to know she had options, that she wasn't trapped or dependent. Leah's transformation over the weeks was striking. Her movements, once tentative and drained by illness, were now strong and confident. Her voice, once nearly a whisper, had regained the full tone Jack remembered from their youth. Even her posture changed, shoulders back, head held high. It was more than a physical recovery. It was the blossoming of something long suppressed. Her dignity. Jack watched her in the garden, teaching Emma to recognize the perfect moment to pick tomatoes. He saw how she reorganized the pantry with Sophie, turning it into a fun, educational activity. He noticed how she made colorful bracelets with the twins, encouraging their tiny accomplishments with sincere praise. The girls were flourishing in the new routine, too. Emma seemed less burdened, allowing herself moments of genuine childhood, chasing butterflies, laughing at Sophie's antics. The twins, once so silent and joined at the hip, now explored the yard with curiosity, asking questions, showing distinct personalities. Sophie, perhaps the least scarred by hardship because of her naturally optimistic temperament, now overflowed with joy. She'd adopted the pigs as special friends, naming each one and telling them elaborate stories during feeding times. One afternoon, while Jack repaired a fence, he overheard the little girl explaining quite seriously to one pig, "Mum works for real now. It's not like before when we had to stay quiet and wait. Now she cooks and cleans Uncle Jack's house, and he pays her with real money." The pride in her childish voice was palpable. Jack realized that for them, especially Sophie, the change wasn't just material, but emotional. Seeing their mother valued, respected, and fairly paid for her work was rebuilding the image they had of her, and, by extension, their image of themselves and their place in the world. Leah's progress wasn't limited to work. Gradually, Jack noticed she began occupying spaces in the house without asking permission, not out of arrogance, but from a tacit understanding that she had earned that right. She rearranged the kitchen for better efficiency, moved some furniture in the living room to create a play area where the adults could keep an eye on the kids, turned a corner of the porch into a little workshop for crafts. She never asked beforehand, but always explained afterward, ready to revert things if Jack disapproved. He never did. He saw how each change made the house more functional, more welcoming. Leah claimed her space not by asking for it, but by building it with her own hands, through daily work, constant improvements, and small transformations that benefited everyone. One evening after dinner, Jack found Leah on the porch sewing a dress for Sophie from some fabric she'd bought in town. "It's going to look great," he said, sitting in the chair beside her. "I hope so," Leah replied, snipping a thread. "Sophie's so excited about a new dress. I'm afraid to disappoint her." "You never disappoint them," Jack said earnestly. Leah paused her sewing and looked at him. "I have disappointed them many times, but you're here now, building something better." She nodded slowly, returning to her sewing. After a few minutes of companionable silence, she spoke again without raising her eyes. "Thank you, Jack, not for the roof or the food, but for seeing me as capable." Jack watched her hands working expertly with needle and thread, creating something new from scraps. "You always were," he replied simply. "You just needed a chance to remember." That night, as the moon rose and the farm's nocturnal sounds filled the air, two people fate had separated and then reunited, shared a moment of mutual understanding, based not on words or promises, but on respect for work, dignity, and the human capacity to rebuild what was lost. Sunday dawned perfect. Clear skies, mild temperature, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. After breakfast, the girls begged to play outside, eager to enjoy the beautiful day. "Can we, Mom?" Sophie asked, already bouncing on her chair. "Please?" Leah exchanged a quick glance with Jack before answering. "You can, but stay where we can see you." "I'll watch them," Emma promised, automatically taking on her role as the responsible older sister. Jack watched the four rush outside, Sophie leading, the twins close behind, Emma bringing up the rear, always watchful. It was amazing how in just a few weeks, the children had adapted to the farm, turning it into their own personal playground. "Shall we sit outside too?" he suggested to Leah as she finished putting away the breakfast dishes. "It's too nice a day to stay indoors." Leah nodded, drying her hands on her apron. "I'll grab some lemonade." Jack carried 2 chairs outside, setting them under the generous shade of an old oak in the yard. The centuries-old tree was the biggest on the property, its thick branches spreading in every direction like welcoming arms. From there, they had a perfect view of the open field where the girls were playing. Leah joined him shortly after, carrying a pitcher of lemonade and 2 glasses. They sat side by side in comfortable silence while Sophie organized her sisters, for a game of hide-and-seek. "No peeking!" the little girl shouted, covering her eyes with her hands and starting to count aloud. 1, 2, 3. The twins ran off together, as they always did, searching for a hiding place. Emma moved more strategically, picking a carefully chosen bush farther away. "She's always been the best at hiding," Leah said, watching her oldest. "Sometimes I had to call her over and over to find her." Jack smiled, his eyes following the children. There was a time when that field was empty and silent. Now it was full of laughter and shouts of "found you" that seemed to breathe new life into the land. After a few rounds of hide-and-seek, the girls switched to tag. Sophie ran in zigzags, making the twins squeal with laughter as they tried to catch her. Emma was quick and agile, easily escaping pursuit. "We used to play out there too," Jack said suddenly, the words slipping out as if they had a life of their own. Leah turned to him, surprised that he was mentioning the past they'd both been avoiding. Her eyes met his briefly, before they went back to watching the kids. "Yes, we did," she replied, a small smile touching her lips. "And we grew beans. You never let me pull them out too soon." Jack laughed softly at the memory. "Because you wanted to yank them out after just 3 days to see if they'd grown. I was impatient." "You were curious," Jack corrected. "Always wanted to see how things worked. Remember when you took apart that old clock of my father's?" Leah covered her face with her hands, laughing. "Please don't remind me. He was furious. Only until you showed him you could put it back together, and it worked again." Leah's laugh turned into something softer, almost melancholic. "Your dad was a good man, strict, but fair." "Not like yours," Jack said carefully. Leah took a sip of lemonade, as if she needed a moment to respond. "My father had his demons," she finally said. "He couldn't always control them." Jack nodded, respecting what remained unsaid. He remembered Leah's father well, an unpredictable temper, alternating between excessive affection and bursts of anger, often worsened by drinking. "I remember your mom in the kitchen." Jack changed the subject, noticing the tension in Leah's hands. "The smell of bread coming out of the oven every afternoon." Leah's face lit up. She loved to bake, said it was the purest way to show love. "She always gave me cookies when I came over, even when we hadn't planned to play. Because she knew you liked them," Leah smiled. "Mom noticed that kind of thing. Quiet, but observant." Jack recalled Leah's mother, a gentle, soft-spoken woman who always seemed slightly afraid. Now, as an adult, he understood why. "Remember the little spot we made behind that bush?" Leah pointed to a particular corner of the yard. "We used to hide seeds there. And shiny pebbles," Jack added. "And that time we found a bird's nest that had fallen." "The eggs were broken," Leah said softly, sadness in her voice. "You were devastated. And you held a funeral for them. Gave a speech and everything." "I was 9 and thought I knew everything about life and death," Leah said, shaking her head, amused by her own childhood seriousness. The girls had changed games again. Sophie was teaching the twins how to form a circle, all holding hands, spinning and chanting. Emma stood a bit apart, drawing in the dirt with a stick. "She's a lot like you," Jack said, indicating Emma with a nod. "Not just how she looks, but her sense of responsibility." Leah watched her oldest for a moment, a mix of pride and worry in her eyes. She had to grow up too fast. She took on responsibilities she never should have. The silence returned, laden with unspoken histories about the intervening years. A breeze rustled the oak leaves overhead, creating a dappled pattern of light and shadow on the ground. "Do you remember that time we climbed to the top of this tree?" Jack asked, looking at the branches above them. "Sure," Leah smiled. "You told me we could see the ocean from up there. And you believed it. For about 2 minutes. Then I realized that was impossible. The ocean is over 60 miles away," Jack laughed. "But the view was still pretty." "It was perfect," Leah agreed, and there was something in her voice, a vulnerability, a truth that made Jack look at her. Time had changed them both. Jack saw fine lines at the corners of her eyes, subtle traces of worry on her forehead. She was no longer the carefree girl with braids and skinned knees. Yet when she smiled like that, he still caught a glimpse of the child who knew every corner of this farm as well as he did. "We were happy here, sir, for a while," Leah said quietly, almost as if speaking to herself. Jack felt the weight of those words, the happiness mentioned, and also the implicit recognition that it ended. There were so many questions he wanted to ask. Why did her family leave so suddenly? Why no news after that? What happened in the years since? But this wasn't the time for interrogations. It was a moment of reconnection, of shared memories that formed the foundation of something they might rebuild. "Remember that summer it rained so much the creek overflowed?" Jack asked instead. "And turned the whole field into a giant mud pit?" Leah finished, eyes bright. "Your dad was furious when we came home covered head to toe. But it was my mom who made us clean up, bucket after bucket of water." Leah laughed, the sound clear and genuine in the warm morning air. "Worth it. It was the most fun we had that year." A joyful squeal from Sophie cut their conversation short. She'd discovered a frog and was showing it to her sisters, who alternated between curiosity and alarm. "Look, Mom, look, Uncle Jack!" Sophie shouted, holding the tiny amphibian gently in her hands. "We see it, sweetie," Leah called, waving. "Be gentle with her." Jack noticed how Leah brightened when interacting with her daughters. There was a strength in her beyond physical resilience, a determination, an unwavering commitment to those 4 lives. "You're a good mother, Leah," he said simply. She turned to him, surprised by the unexpected compliment. "I do my best. It's not always enough." "It's more than enough. Look at them." Jack gestured toward the girls. "They're happy. They're loved. That's what matters." Leah didn't answer with words, but Jack saw a soft blush on her cheeks, the glimmer of gratitude in her eyes, before she looked away, suddenly shy. They went back to watching the children in silence, but something had shifted between them. The past, with all its joys and pains, had resurfaced, not as a barrier, but as a bridge, a connection neither of them had expected to regain. Those shared memories under the old oak had opened a door. Through it came the sweet nostalgia of a lost childhood, but also the possibility of a new understanding, a new closeness. When Sophie ran over to show them a drawing she'd made in the dirt, Jack and Leah stood up together, moving in sync as if they'd never been separated by all those years. The past was there, in their knowing smiles, in the references only they both understood, in the stories only they remembered. It was there in how their shoulders nearly touched as they leaned down to see Sophie's drawing, in the familiarity that time hadn't entirely erased. And perhaps, Jack thought as he watched Leah patiently explain to the twins why the frog needed to go back to the yard, perhaps that shared past was exactly what they needed to build a future, still uncertain, still unsaid, but possible. Summer rolled on, bringing longer days and warm nights. At Dalton Farm, a natural routine had settled in with surprising ease. The girls knew their places and tasks. Leah quietly ran the household, while Jack focused on the outside work. One Wednesday, the sky was a particularly vivid blue, not a cloud in sight. Jack was finishing repairs on the tractor, hands smeared with grease, shirt sticking to his back with sweat. When he finally got the engine running, he decided he deserved a break. He headed for the water pump beside the barn, washed his hands and face, and took a long drink. That's when he saw her. Leah was out behind the house, hanging clothes on the line. Her movements were efficient and precise. She'd rolled up her sleeves, and her hair was in a loose bun, a few strands escaping in the breeze. The afternoon sun highlighted her silhouette against the green of the field. He stood there watching without calling out. There was something hypnotic in the simplicity of that scene. Leah pinning up white sheets that billowed like sails, then hanging small, colorful shirts, organizing everything by size and color. She belonged here. The thought struck Jack with unexpected clarity. It wasn't just that Leah had adapted well. It was as if the farm had been waiting for her to return all this time. Without realizing it, Jack began walking toward her. Leah noticed him when he was only a few steps away and smiled briefly before turning back to her task. "Got the tractor fixed?" she asked without looking at him, folding a towel over the line. "Finally," Jack replied, stopping on the opposite side of the clothesline. "Where are the girls?" "Martha took them into town. They're helping out at the library. Seems they're organizing some kids' event." "All four?" "Yes." Leah smiled. Sophie was so excited she woke up before dawn. Even the twins were bouncing around the house. Jack nodded, happy to know the girls were settling into the community, another sign they were putting down roots, building a life beyond the confines of the farm. Silence fell, comfortable as it had become. Jack grabbed a shirt from the basket and hung it on the line, deciding to help. They worked side by side for a few minutes, just the wind and the birds for company. "I never understood why you left." The words came out almost on their own, surprising even him. He hadn't planned to bring it up just then. But on this golden afternoon, with Leah so close and so at ease, the question that had haunted him for years simply slipped out. Leah froze, clothespin still in hand. She didn't look at him right away. She finished pinning the little dress, adjusted it so it hung neatly, then turned to face Jack. "Maybe I can finally tell you now." Her eyes met his, and Jack saw something new there, a resolve, a threshold crossed. Leah didn't say more, just went back to the basket, but her gaze had said it clearly. The truth was coming. They finished hanging the laundry in silence. The sun began its descent, painting the sky with orange and pink. The temperature dropped slightly, making the air more comfortable after the day's heat. "Want to sit on the porch?" Jack suggested, once the last sheet was pinned. Leah nodded, picking up the empty basket. "I'll make some tea first." Jack waited for her on the front porch, settling into one of the rocking chairs his father had built decades ago. He watched the sunset begin, the colors growing more intense by the minute. Leah appeared a few minutes later with 2 steaming mugs. She handed one to Jack and took the seat beside him. The scent of chamomile hung in the warm air between them. For a while they just sipped tea, appreciating the show before them. Jack didn't press. He knew Leah would speak when she was ready. "My mother was accused of theft," she began calmly, almost detached. "But she never stole anything." Jack turned to her, surprised. Of all the possibilities he'd considered over the years, this had never crossed his mind. Theft? Of what? "Jewelry. A diamond brooch that belonged to your mother." The revelation hit Jack like a punch to the gut. "My mother accused yours." Leah nodded, her eyes on the horizon. "Your mother wanted us gone, and she got her wish." Margaret Dalton had always been reserved, strict in her standards. Jack couldn't picture her making a false accusation. "How do you know she didn't?" he began. "My mother." Leah cut him off, a rare spark of anger in her tone. "She barely had the courage to ask for a raise at work, Jack. You think she'd steal a diamond brooch? To sell where? In a town where everybody knows everyone?" Jack didn't reply. Of course she was right. Diana Carter had always been gentle, almost too submissive. The idea of her as a thief was absurd. "Your mother claimed she saw mine take the brooch from her room," Leah continued. "There was no proof, but Margaret Dalton's word carried more weight than that of a housekeeper. My mother was fired, and the sheriff suggested it would be better if we moved away." The bitterness in her last words was palpable. Jack felt the injustice, even after all these years. "I didn't know," he murmured. "My parents never told me the real reason." "You were what, 13? Of course they wouldn't," Leah sighed. "Anyway, we moved far away. No references, no friends, no savings. It was hard." The soft way she said hard suggested it barely scratched the surface of the truth. "What happened after that?" Jack asked gently. Leah took another sip of tea, as if drawing strength from the warm liquid. "My mother got sick. The stress, the move, the poor conditions. It started as a cough, ended up as tuberculosis. She fought for 3 years, but in the end..." Leah paused, taking a deep breath. "I was 17 when she died." Jack's heart clenched. 17. Still a child, alone in the world. "I survived however I could," Leah continued, her voice now mechanical, as if recounting someone else's story. "Worked in diners, in stores, as a cleaner. Moved from town to town, chasing opportunities." The sky had deepened to crimson and violet now, with the first stars appearing. "When I was 22, I met Michael. He was charming, a smooth talker, full of plans. We got married 6 months later. Emma was born the following year." A fragile smile flitted across Leah's lips at the mention of her oldest daughter. "We were okay for a while. Michael found a stable job. I managed the house and Emma. By the time Sophie was born, things were strained. He started drinking more, working less. Jack listened in silence, giving Leah the space to share her story at her own pace. When I found out I was pregnant with the twins, Michael got furious. He said we couldn't afford another baby, let alone two. One night, after a terrible fight, he walked out. Never came back. The simplicity of that statement didn't match the devastation it must have caused. Jack tried to imagine Leah, pregnant, with two small children, abandoned by her husband. "So he left you pregnant with the twins," he repeated softly. 7 months along, Leah confirmed. "I tried to support us all. I went hungry, Jack." Her voice trembled. "I hid my pregnancy under baggy clothes to find work. No one hires a visibly pregnant woman for heavy labor." Jack closed his eyes briefly. It was too painful to picture Leah, who he remembered as a laughing, bright-eyed girl, forced to hide her pregnancy to feed her children. "The birth was difficult," she went on. "No health insurance, no proper care. The twins were small but healthy, thank God. I went back to work 2 weeks later. I had no choice." "And Emma?" Jack asked, recalling the little girl's seriousness, her constantly watchful eyes. "Emma grew up too fast," Leah said, voice heavy with regret. "By 4, she was helping with Sophie. By 5, she could heat up soup on the stove while I worked. By 6 down, she was basically a second mother to the twins." Night had fully fallen now, the sky studded with stars. The crescent moon cast a silvery glow on the fields. "We got by like that for another 2 years. I did any job I could find, waitressing, cleaning, factory work, seasonal harvests. We moved around following work. We ended up in that cabin because it was cheap and the landlord didn't ask questions." Leah placed her empty mug on the porch's wooden floor. "Then the illness came. I couldn't get out of bed." Her voice, which had stayed almost distant until now, finally cracked. Jack saw tears glint in her eyes. "Pneumonia. It started as a cold, but got worse fast. No money for medicine, no doctor. We ran out of food. Emma." Leah swallowed hard, fighting for composure. "She decided they had to find help, against my orders, because she knew I was dying." Leah lifted her head, blinking back tears. "I never begged, but my daughters saw me at my worst, weak, powerless, unable to protect them." Jack felt a lump in his throat. He reached out his hand, hesitated, then gently rested it on hers. She didn't pull away. "I was just a kid," he said, voice thick with emotion. "But even so, I feel like I failed you. If I had known, if I'd understood why you left, maybe I could have done something." Leah didn't reply right away. Her fingers squeezed his slightly, a gesture both gentle and meaningful. "You didn't fail me, Jack," she finally said. "Neither of us had a choice back then. We were children. And now?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken possibilities. "Now we're adults with a lot of scars," Leah answered, "and 4 little girls who deserve more than life has given them so far." They sat in silence for a long moment, still holding hands, gazing at the starry night. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, or one loaded with tension. It was a silence that acknowledged the magnitude of what had just been shared, what had been lost, and perhaps what could be rebuilt. Leah didn't say everything was okay. She didn't offer easy absolution or deny the impact of her suffering, but in her silence there was forgiveness, not just for Jack, but for the past, for circumstances, maybe even for herself. When Martha brought the girls home an hour later, she found Jack and Leah still on the porch, now sitting apart, but with a new understanding between them. A silent awareness that changed everything without outwardly altering anything. The girls came in talking all at once about the books, the kids, and the cookies the librarian had given them. Sophie demonstrated how she helped read a story. The twins showed off their drawings. Even Emma seemed lighter, her eyes bright. Leah greeted them with hugs and questions, but Jack noticed something different about her, as though an invisible weight had been partially lifted from her shoulders. Later, when the girls were in bed and the house quiet, Jack found Leah in the kitchen, preparing bread dough for the next day. "Thank you," he said simply. Leah looked at him, hands covered in flour, pausing briefly. For what? For trusting me with your story. I know it wasn't easy. She nodded, returning to kneading. Some truths need time to be told, and some need to be heard at the right moment, Jack added. A small smile touched Leah's lips. Exactly. That late afternoon had been unlike any other. A door had opened. A bridge started to form over the chasm of the past. It didn't erase the pain, didn't undo the injustices, didn't recover the lost years. But it offered something neither Jack nor Leah had expected to find again. The possibility of a new beginning, built not on illusions, but on the raw, honest truth of their lives. Leah's revelation haunted Jack for days. The injustice she and her mother had endured, a lie that had changed the course of so many lives, weighed on his conscience like a stone. He couldn't look at Emma, so serious and prematurely responsible, without thinking she might have had a normal childhood. He couldn't watch the twins play in the yard without imagining the difficult early years they endured. He couldn't hear Sophie's excited stories without wondering how many more happy tales she could have had. And he couldn't look at Leah, working with renewed dignity, without thinking of all she'd lost because of a lie he suspected his own mother had told. On the morning of the third day after talking with Leah, Jack made a decision. He needed answers. "I'm going into town today," he announced at breakfast. "Got some errands to run?" Leah studied him over her coffee cup, as if reading his thoughts. "Want me to pack you something?" "No need," Jack replied, striving to sound casual. "I'll be back for dinner." The retirement home where Margaret Dalton lived was about 40 minutes away by car. It was a pleasant place and with spacious gardens and attentive staff. Jack paid a considerable monthly fee to ensure his mother received the best care for her 78 years and fragile health. He didn't visit as often as he should, he knew. Their conversations were always superficial, focusing on the weather, the farm, local news, never on feelings, never on painful history. Today would be different. When Jack arrived, he found Margaret sitting in a rocking chair on the porch. Despite her age and the illness that slowly diminished her mobility, she kept an impeccable posture, grey hair neatly arranged, clothes without a wrinkle. Control had always been her hallmark. "Jack!" Her eyes lit up upon seeing him. What a pleasant surprise. He leaned in to kiss her forehead, noting the familiar perfume she'd worn for as long as he could remember. "Hello, Mother. How are you feeling today?" "Oh, you know, my bones complain, but my head still works," she smiled, indicating the chair beside her. "Sit, Mrs. Russell will bring tea shortly." Jack sat, glancing at the well-tended garden. A few elderly ladies strolled along stone paths, leaning on canes or assisted by aides. One very old man fed the birds from a bench under a tree. "How's the farm?" Margaret asked, adjusting the shawl on her shoulders. "It's fine," Jack said. "Actually, there are a few developments." "Oh, do tell." Jack took a deep breath. There was no easy way to start. "Leah Carter is back." The effect was immediate. Color drained from Margaret's face. Her hands, which had been resting calmly in her lap, gripped her skirt fabric. "What?" "Leah came back," Jack repeated, watching his mother's reaction. "She has 4 young daughters." Margaret diverted her gaze to the garden, but Jack could tell she wasn't seeing the flowers or the people. She was seeing ghosts. How did that happen?" she asked, her voice suddenly frail. "I found the girls near the farm. They were lost, looking for help. Their mother was sick, alone in a cabin in the woods." Jack paused, noting how each word seemed to hit his mother physically. "I took them in, took care of them. Then I found Leah. She had pneumonia, almost died. She's all right now." His mother's question was almost a whisper. "Physically, yes, she's recovering." Jack straightened in his chair. Time to address the point. "Mother, Leah told me why they left." Margaret closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her wrinkled cheek. "She said you accused her mother of theft." Mrs. Russell arrived at that moment with a tray of tea. Margaret composed herself quickly, thanking her with a forced smile. As soon as the staff member left, the smile vanished. "Jack, you have to understand," she began, her voice trembling. Understand what, Mother? That you lied. That you destroyed two innocent people's lives with a lie. The words came out harsher than he'd intended. Jack took a deep breath, trying to control the anger welling up inside him. He hadn't come for a fight, he'd come for answers. Margaret set her untouched cup aside. Her hands shook. Your father had an affair with Leah's mother. The words were low, heavy with old pain. I made up the theft story. It was my revenge. The confession hung between them, raw and devastating. Diana never stole anything, Jack asked, though he already knew the answer. No. Margaret looked at him with tearful eyes. Diana was a good woman. Better than I ever was. Why, Mother? The hurt, Jack, the humiliation. Your father and Diana, it wasn't just a fling. They loved each other. Her voice cracked on the last word. I found letters, gifts, overheard conversations, knew they planned to run away together. Jack felt as if the ground had dropped out from under him. His father, the man he'd always seen as upright and honest, and Diana Carter, Leah's gentle mother. And instead of confronting them, you chose to destroy Diana. It wasn't a question. I was angry, afraid. You were 13, Jack, if your father left her. So you invented a story about a stolen brooch. Margaret nodded slowly. The sheriff was a family friend. All it took was a suggestion. And your father, he knew the truth, of course, but he didn't say anything. I guess he felt too guilty to defend Diana. Jack tried to process it all. His mother, deliberately lying. His father, too cowardly to defend the woman he loved. And Diana and Leah, innocent victims paying the price for someone else's betrayal. They left that same night, Margaret continued, words tumbling out as though she'd held them in for years. The next day, your father demanded to know what I'd done. We had the worst fight of our marriage. But you stayed together. Yes, initially for your sake. Then, out of habit, I suppose. We were never the same again, Jack. Your father carried that guilt to his grave. Jack closed his eyes, remembering how his father had been in the later years, quiet, distant, drinking more than he should, always staring at the horizon as if waiting for something that would never come. You never tried to find them, never tried to fix what you did? Margaret shook her head. Shame, Jack. It's a very effective prison. They sat in silence for several minutes. The tea grew cold. In the garden, life went on. Conversation, distant laughter, birds singing. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Mother, Jack finally said, the words bitter on his tongue. I'm not asking for forgiveness, son. Margaret looked at him with resignation. Some things can't be forgiven, only acknowledged. It's too late to fix what I did to Diana. She's gone now, but Leah... Leah survived, Jack finished, in spite of everything you did. Yes, Margaret lowered her gaze. Tell her I'm sorry. I know it means nothing now, but tell her anyway. Jack rose to his feet. He felt drained, as if he'd aged 10 years in this one conversation. I'm leaving. I have a lot to think about. Margaret nodded, not trying to stop him. Will you come back? The question carried more meaning than the words. It was a plea not to abandon her, not to punish her by withdrawing the presence of her only child. I will, Jack answered after a pause. But I need time. On the drive home, Jack went slower than usual, trying to make sense of his thoughts. Anger, disappointment, and sadness churned inside him. He thought of his father, torn between duty and love, of his mother, so frail now, yet capable of such cruelty in the past, of Diana, who lost everything for loving the wrong man, of Leah, whose life was derailed by lies and secrets she never suspected. By the time he pulled up to the farm, the sun was setting. The sky was painted in oranges and reds, a beauty that felt out of place in his turbulent heart. He parked the car, but stayed inside for a moment, mustering courage. Through the windshield, he saw Leah and the girls hanging laundry on the clothesline. Emma helped with the bigger pieces, Sophie folded what was dry, and the twins carried small items in a basket. They moved in unison, chatting and giggling. A family, wounded, incomplete, shaped by hardship, but a family nonetheless. In that moment, watching them in the golden light of late afternoon, Jack made a decision. He couldn't do nothing. 3 days passed. Jack worked from dawn to dusk, often disappearing for hours without explanation. Leah watched him curiously, but respected his silence. There was a new intensity in him, a determined look she didn't question. On the morning of the fourth day, Jack walked into the kitchen at breakfast with a smile he hadn't worn in days. "I have a surprise for you," he announced. Sophie started bouncing in her seat immediately. "A surprise? What is it? Is it a cake? A puppy?" "Sophie," Leah gently cut her off. "Let Uncle Jack speak." Jack smiled at the little ball of energy. "Not a puppy. Something bigger. Bigger than a puppy." Sophie's eyes widened. "A horse. I'll show you after breakfast." They ate faster than ever. The girls practically inhaled their food, eager to discover the surprise. Even Emma, usually so reserved, showed signs of curiosity. When they finished, Jack led them along a path that wound through a part of the property they rarely visited. It was a more secluded area, surrounded by trees, overlooking a small pond. As they neared, Leah was the first to notice. Between the trees stood a structure that hadn't been there before, or rather it had been, but now looked completely transformed. It was a little house, an old caretaker's cottage that had stood abandoned for years, now fully renovated. Freshly painted white walls, new windows with blue shutters, a small but inviting porch, a stone walkway leading to the door. "What is this?" Leah asked, her voice barely audible. Jack smiled, opening a small gate. "Come see." The girls ran ahead, Sophie in the lead as always, the twins close behind, Emma more cautious. The cottage was small but perfectly functional. A living room with a fireplace, a compact but fully equipped kitchen, 2 bedrooms, one for Leah, one for the girls, a clean, modern bathroom, large windows that let in plenty of light. "Look at the stove, look at the bathroom," Sophie yelled, rushing from room to room. "There's a real bathtub." The twins followed, touching everything with silent wonder. Emma walked slowly, checking every detail, as if making sure this was real and not a dream. Behind the house, Jack had started a small garden, clearly marked beds, a few seedlings in place, a simple but efficient irrigation system. Leah stood in the doorway, unable to move or speak. Jack approached her. "I can't change what happened to you," he said softly, "but I can make sure that here, you'll never be cast aside again." Leah looked at him, tears glistening in her eyes. "Jack, I can't accept—" "It's not charity," he interrupted gently. "It's justice. Late, imperfect, but still justice." Emma joined them, her eyes solemn as they roamed over the place once more before resting on Jack. "This is a real house, right?" she asked quietly. "We won't be hungry again." Jack knelt to her level, resting his hands firmly on her small shoulders. "Never again," he promised, looking directly into her eyes. "This is your home now for all of you, for as long as you want." Emma hugged him then, a gesture as unexpected as it was moving. Jack wrapped his arms around her, feeling the small body that had carried so much burden finally relax a bit. When Emma finally let go and ran off to check out the bedroom with her sisters, Leah stepped closer. Her face was damp with tears that she no longer held back. "Why?" she asked simply. Jack could have told her about his visit to his mother, about the terrible confession, about the guilt he felt for what his family had done. He could have explained that this house was his way of making amends, but he didn't. Some truths wouldn't help Leah now. "Because you deserve a place that's yours," he replied. "A place where you can build something new." Leah approached, taking his hands in hers. They were warm, slightly calloused from work, full of life. "Thank you, Jack," she said, voice thick with emotion, "for showing up, for staying." Jack didn't answer. He simply smiled, squeezing her hands gently before letting go. They stood there, watching the girls excitedly explore every corner of the cottage. Sophie was already planning where to hang her drawings. The twins were jumping on the new beds. Emma was checking the windows and doors, perhaps testing how secure they were. The afternoon sun bathed the small clearing in which the house stood, filtering through the trees in golden rays. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, making a soft, whispery music. In that moment, Jack saw something he hadn't expected to see so soon, a new beginning, already taking root. It wasn't perfect. It didn't erase the scars of the past or undo the years of suffering. But it was there, quietly growing between them, founded on respect, work, and a love that didn't dare speak its name yet, but showed itself in silence, in small gestures, in the promise of better days. Life doesn't always return what it took away, but sometimes it offers a place where dignity can grow again. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.